The third indicator that we look at during the business cycle is the inflation rate. This is the rate at which the general or average level of prices is rising. If prices are falling, the inflation rate is negative. We usually measure the inflation rate by looking at how fast prices of consumer goods are rising, using an indicator called the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Statistics Canada uses purchasing data to construct a market basket that represents a typical household's annual purchases, similar to what it does to measure poverty. But the CPI market basket includes all the goods purchased by a typical household, rather than just basic needs. StatsCan then uses data on prices to calculate the total price of the market basket at different points in time. The inflation rate is the rate at which the total purchase price of the market basket is increasing. This approach is used because it ensures that inflation rates accurately represent the impact that rising prices have on Canadian households' ability to purchase goods and services. This graph adds the inflation rate to GDP growth rate and unemployment rate that we've been already looking at. However, it's a bit difficult to see changes in the inflation rate. So this next graph zooms in a little closer. We can see that the inflation rate doesn't follow as predictable a pattern with respect to the business cycle as GDP and unemployment. It has actually been fairly steady in Canada over this whole time period, mainly because the government has taken action to prevent big changes in inflation. We'll talk about that in the last lesson this week. Nevertheless, it is often the case that economic contractions tend to lead to lower inflation rates, especially after the fact. Inflation rates almost never actually become negative. If they do, this is called deflation, and it is a sign that the economy is really struggling. However, you can see that after the 2008 to 2009 recession, the inflation rate dipped. And again, after the economy almost went into a recession in 2015. We also have a bit of a dip associated with the COVID-19 recession. So in general, economic contractions tend to cause the inflation rate to decrease. Expansions, conversely, can cause the inflation rate to increase. We'll talk about why this happens in the next lesson. This is primarily a problem when the economy is growing faster than normal, which is called an economic boom. During economic booms, unemployment is unusually low and inflation is unusually high. This can be a problem because high inflation can make consumer goods and other things, like housing, unaffordable for households. We don't really have an example of this on the graph, but in the lesson, we'll see an example of this in Alberta.